So, a distress call reunites Pike with a long-lost flame from his past, but when the Enterprise discovers that Paradise is merely a facade for a world of suffering, what will our intrepid crew actually do? Of course, we're back for a weekly review of Star Trek, so without further ado, let's take a look at the latest episode of Strange New Worlds, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Spoiler warning, we're talking about Strange New Worlds in full detail. As such, you should man the escape pods if you don't want spoilers. Seriously. Welcome to Trek Central, I'm your host Captain Jack and let's get straight into it. This episode of Strange New Worlds was written by Robin Weisselman and also Bill Wolkoff, with both having written previous episodes of the show. The episode is directed by Andy Agamarian, who has also previously directed an episode of Star Trek Discovery. Now, you know what I'm going to say. Before we warp into this video, if you want to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe. As always, please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then of course we want to hear about it. Okay, hit it. So whereas we got a comedy with the last week episode Spock Amok, this episode we almost get an investigative tragedy, and this one really hits hard. The world building of this episode, and specifically the World of Majalis, is great, with these fantastic visuals of a paradise in the clouds, rising above this planet of lakes of lava and acid. But what allows the society to get to a state where suffering does not plague them, and that is the root of this episode. But let's talk about some other aspects of this episode before we talk about what would be the theme and message of the actual episode itself, which only comes to light near the very end of the actual episode, because of course it does. Let's talk about Uhura. Whoever from the Strange New Worlds writing room thought of Uhura going through a cadet rotation on the ship is a genius, and I want to personally congratulate them. So far we've already utilised Uhura to go between different departments and give us different types of story, and yet do it with Uhura and flesh out her younger self at the same time. Now this time she's on rotation in security under Lan, who everyone likes to tease, even the captain, who teases Uhura by warning her about security rule number 7, yet not telling her what it is. Pike is just great at being friends with his crew, yet still the captain. It's just a very natural way that works well and is the best leader, I think. We do get her on the landing party, but you always learn to interact with crashed ships with your tricorder, and not just by messing around with ship's consoles. It seems like Lan took this lesson on from the Klingon War in Discovery, which is a cool little detail and some great world building. Basically, Klingon ships have a scuttle system, so if an unauthorized person accesses the ship or attempts to down the sort of database, then it'll probably activate a self-destruct and you go bye-bye. I wonder what Lan was doing during the Klingon War. This is a book idea if anyone's interested. Seriously, someone please. Now we then get some cool investigative analysis of Uhura, who finds out that the languages of the colony planet and Majalis are the same root structure, therefore deducing that the colony planet is an offshoot of Majalians, which helps the crew manage to piece the puzzle together and solve the plot of this episode. But too late. It is really nice to see Uhura's skills as a linguist being utilised, and having Lan trust her and back up her findings in front of Captain Pike. Lan may be honest to a fault, but she really supports those who work with her, and it's nice to see. So Elder Gamal is a character that by the beginning I thought I wouldn't like. He's mean to his child, even going so far as to refer to him as a child only in a biological sense. Seeing this child is not as in a spirit, but then this hour-long episode we sort of understand why Gamal starts to change. He is unwilling to help M'Benga with his daughter's health issues, at first. He's also unwilling to let the first servant have fun. Now by the end of the episode, he actually starts to care for his actual son. He goes as far to fake a kidnapping attempt, but doing so to make sure his child doesn't get sacrificed by the Majalians for their paradise. By the end, Hughes Majid gives an excellent performance as Gamal, where you can really tell the emotion behind the actions, and in the end even helps M'Benga with the start of a cure for M'Benga's ailing child. The first servant, played by actor Ian Ho, is a very interesting character. Ian Ho does a really good job of this. It's this very intelligent, curious child who seemingly puts everyone at ease, even Mr. Spock. First servant even managed to figure out where Rukira is, in M'Benga's daughter, and plays hopscotch with her, making rings out of noble gases. He is such a nice and bright child, and you think if Majalis has such children, they could figure out their issues, but instead they sacrifice them to this machine in order to keep their paradise afloat among the clouds. You can even see this from not only giving a first servant a name, only a title. He's only a tool to them, and may pay lip service to him being everyone's family. He doesn't even have a name, only a purpose. This is where the crux of the tragedy of the episode comes in. This concept of ascension of the first servant to keep the Majalians afloat and away from the suffering of the surface requires the suffering and death of one. A society which has no suffering but relies on the suffering of an individual child is a very original series concept, And also, we're only a very pressing issue from the modern era, where we allow the deaths of children just to keep society going on its status quo, never wondering if we can leave a state and put in the effort to change it, because it's just comfortable where we currently are. In a way, the child is indoctrinated to undertake this suffering. They are told it's the highest honour, they're doing it for their family, and before the first servant undertakes this suffering, you can see the cracks starting to form. Seeing the cost of what we're seeing a dead, burned out corpse of a child, and not wanting to be a part of that, but then still going ahead of it because it's probably what you've been told to do since you were born, hence the indoctrination. You work for the good of the system, and everyone is grateful for you to do that. Again, it's a very TOS concept for an episode, remarkably similar to A Taste of Armageddon, which would sacrifice its people for the preservation of the status quo. And that's the same issue we have here. And those people in the TOS episode are equally indoctrinated. They believe they must enter their disintegration booths and die, in order to make sure society continues its current limbo state, and there isn't a chance that it might get worse. We actually explore a similar concept in a Stargate Atlantis episode, where once a child reaches the age of 16, they sacrifice themselves, essentially population control. Now if you don't want that chance to maybe get worse, it may never get better. It'll just remain trapped in a simple state of limbo. You'll also get comfortable with the costs, whether it be one life or thousands. You'll eventually get comfortable with it and continue the cycle. The cycle must never be broken in a sense. A tidy solution that preserves civilization despite the cost in lives. In a way, Pike doesn't go far enough compared to the likes of James Kirk. Kirk would have taken the child out of the machine and let paradise fall, because if it's the idea that people in Majalis can become too comfortable, i.e. sacrificing children, and are too coward to try and change anything, they will continue to let this injustice carry on. Captain Kirk would have made him uncomfortable and forced him to come to terms with their own suffering. Whereas Pike just goes to report it to Starfleet. He knows he can't do anything, and Starfleet can't do anything either, as Majalis isn't a Federation world. But he doesn't want to break the rules here, and you can't blame him, because it doesn't directly involve him, whereas in the TOS episode it does directly involve Kirk and his crew. A society which believes its paradise is blinded with suffering its own people. It's fitting in a sense. The visuals of Majalis also help to reinforce the theme of the story, and I wish we just saw more establishing shots of not just the floating city, but the lava planet beneath as well. It really gives this delicate balance of society in mind. But then when you see the planet from the sky in some shots, it really gives further emphasis of the fact you have a small patch of green, a small facade, a small part of a joy over this entire planet of pain and suffering. This is aided by the juxtaposition between the general visuals of Majalis compared to the throne room. You see this paradise in the clouds, almost celestial in nature, of regal ornate buildings and magnificent gardens. But when you get to the throne room, it is very dark and industrial, a place which powers this society, whereas usually you'd imagine the opposite, with the throne room being this regal ornate place, and the outside world consisting of industrial workers and such. It's a very striking contrast. Obviously the throne strapping in whoever sits on it and connects them to this central power grid. Not a throne, but a torture device, almost like an electrical chair in a sense. So we get to the enabler of this system, Alora. She is a fascinating character, and her former relationship with Captain Pike is equally interesting as well, because you can see it's clouding his vision. At first he doesn't believe there is anything wrong with Majalis, even tempted by its medical and technological advancements as perhaps a way not to suffer the fate he has been foretold. But we know he won't take that offer, because it's paid in a price way too high for Pike to accept. The backstory we're told of Alora and we're having met Pike a decade ago when Pike was a lieutenant. Though it might have been more than a decade ago, since Pike has been captain for 9 years at this point. Saving Alora from a shuttle crash near a pulsar, and learning that Alora was out there to find another way to keep Majalis afloat is fascinating. She was doing the work for a change of the system, and hopefully spare more children from being killed to keep society running. But she didn't find a solution and fell into indolence. She accepts this happens now, and even helps it to happen, because she cannot perceive not having paradise. She was too busy trying to preserve this Fox paradise Majalis is in, instead of maybe helping to turn Prospect V into their colony into its own paradise. A true paradise, where suffering may exist, but is accepted and not paid for by such a high price. Alora is the type of character who starts off with the best intentions and is generally a good person, but becomes a bad person merely from her inability to change a system, and contributing to the system paid for by deaths of children. She brings up a good discussion on the Federation, still having children that suffer. Earth may be a paradise, but the rest of the Federation still deals with these issues on its member worlds. However, the difference is that the Federation accepts that this suffering happens, and tries to do something about it, compared to Majalis, which merely just turns a blind eye and sweeps it under the proverbial rug. Alora says that everyone is grateful for the first servant's choice. But this doesn't feel like it's actually lying to herself, more just being able to cope with such a thing happening. This is a heavy episode. It starts with a joyful adventure, mystery and intrigue, and ends with a deep look into the mirror about how our world runs. And what's actually really unique in this is an episode in which the crew fail. They fail to save the child. They fail to change the system. So what will we make out of this? And what will happen eventually down the line, and will it affect them? I think it's also wild to think the last episode was a funny comedy episode, and now we have an episode which I've been to think about for a long time. I truly believe this episode tackles such a big, vast concept, and that's the price we pay for our society, as well as some of the best of them in Trek. We'll be coming back to this episode to look at it from a different angle, and just how this might affect our characters down the road. We have an opportunity for Pike to get past his future pain, but the price for that is too high. What was to me for Pike knowing that there is an option out there, but his morals won't allow him to take it? We also start to have a cure for M'Benga's daughter, which is nice to see the plotline continue, and we see it continues to go along with M and M'Benga. Seeing this kind of suffering he is putting his daughter through just to cure her, keeping her in a pattern buffer and not allowing her to actually live life, is kind of brutal at first. Almost similar to the first servant, just without the ending part. At the end of the day, this is a modernization of a TOS episode, A Taste of Armageddon. And is bad for Strange New Worlds using concepts from TOS? No, not really, I don't think so. This message that we have in the original series are unfortunately still needed. And in a way, the messages of both TOS episodes are obscured from a lot of people, from having watched these episodes as kids, or maybe just not realising a message what it's trying to impact. Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach is a really good, interesting episode of Strange New Worlds, and Star Trek in general, with great writing and excellent scoring by Naomi Melmond. It's really great acting from these guest stars as well, and a pressing message to impart to the viewers at home. So, what do you think of the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds? Let us know in the comment section below, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then yes, we want to hear about it. But you know the usual, keep up to date with us for Star Trek news, lore and more by that subscribe button, and also social media. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends, goodbye.